I'm making a video of the garden in July 2016. I see the last one I did was as long ago as June 2014, so I missed out last year altogether. But I think it's quite nice to do it because it sort of updates all the plants and what's been going on. So I'm going to wander around and talk about it. What you're looking at, of course, is the pond with its water lilies, to which I do absolutely nothing. They come and go as they like. They come out when the sun's out, and they're rather beautiful. Beside the pond is Mr. Croc, which I got sent last month to cheer me up after the referendum. Anyway, he loves it here, keeps an eye on the fish. There are about 4 goldfish here, one of which is actually black, and it's a great big beast, and I very rarely see it, or indeed them. They hide under these leaves, I think. Anyway, on the other side of the pond you can see that beautiful, beautiful, I mustn't turn it round because that ruins it, doesn't it? Portuguese laurel, and there's a very fine daphne too. And on the end here we've got some lavenders on the corner. This lavender is called Goodwin Creek, and it's a really lovely one. There's one on each corner, and if I go down here you'll see the ones in the sun, and they stay out for a long, long time. I planted them in, I think, May probably, and they're always covered in flowers, I suppose, florets or whatever they are, and they do really well, so I'm totally pleased with those. And just going back, in the middle, in pride of place, is the only peony in the garden. This is the naughty Duchess, the Duchesse de Nemours, who you will know was a courtesan of some note. She married 5 times, ended up as a duchess, so she did very well. Anyway, round here is one of the Italian cypresses. There are 2 of them. There's another one just on the corner of the building, just close to where the umbrella is. And that one's not doing quite so well. This one's doing frightfully well. It's growing apace, and I'm going to have to cut away everything above it because it's going right up into it. Here's the loggia, where the Virginia creeper has really taken off, and it's gone right round and is hanging down now beautifully, just as I like it, all over the place. So it's really becoming a creeper-clad loggia, which is just what I wanted. There's a fan fern at the back, which is doing very well as well. Likes it in there. And so you're looking down the garden now, over the pond, and let's go this way. In this little dark area under the laurel, I've put these granite chippings, so it's all light now. Before it was just bare earth, and it was a bit scruffy. Of course it gets scruffy here too, because you get lots of leaves, but it's not too difficult to clean up, and I rather like it. And just beyond there you'll see the table I normally have supper at if the sun's out, because it gets the last of the sun. In here is this rather fine column and the urn on top, which was left to me by the last incumbents, the Lanes, and it does rather well there with a bit of ivy on top. And I've got to point out there are a couple of these fan ferns now in these urns on the edge of the pond. This one in particular is doing really well. I only planted them last month, and they're quite nice, underplanted with ivy, of course. There's a bit of Senecio down here, which doesn't do terribly well, and there's some woodland strawberries behind, which I haven't been paying enough attention to, I think. Down here are lavenders, wisteria, of course there's a cateniasta, Or is it a pyracantha? I never know the difference. It's pyracantha, I think. Lovely white flowers in May. Wisteria is doing nicely, and so are the alchemilla. They took quite a long time to establish, but they're looking really nice. And of course the wall is full of ivy, grapevine. There's quite a nice clematis, which is long over. I think it's Jackmanii, and planted by my predecessors. And of course some rosemary. This is a quince tree, which has been in a couple of years now and is doing really well. It's got a quince on it. Don't know what to do with quince. I shall have to find out. Anyway, before we go down the garden, we'll go across to the other side, past Mr. Orse, which wasn't here when I did the last video. Mr. Orse was moved with some difficulty onto this plinth, and he's jolly happy there. Loves it. He gazes out over the lawn and has a wonderful position. So there he is. Of course, he's backed by lots of choice here. A May bush, and here is a Philadelphus. The Philadelphus was wonderful, but I had it hacked right down last year, and it's only just sort of half back, and it hasn't flowered this year at all, but next year it should be great. It's backed by a fig tree over my neighbour's wall, and in here we've got a number of things. We've got the usual jasmine trachelospermum on the front of this lilac. It's a nice lilac. And we've got what I call Sally's rose. That's Madame Alfred Carrière. That used to be her favourite rose. So planted in memory of Sally Wilson Young. And there's a late Dutch honeysuckle in there as well, which is over. Here, slightly unusually, I think, I've put stachys in both of these pots. This one I did rather more recently. This one was done 2 or 3 months ago, and it's actually come out beautifully. I think they're gorgeous things, stachys. I love them, so soft. And they've got this fascinating, very, very pale mauve flower as well, which I think looks wonderful. Anyway, there's the stachys. And you're looking back at the pond, of course, and these Goodwin Creek lavenders that are doing so nicely. Round here is the other cypress. There's a money tree, which normally lives inside, and there's a lemon tree, which also lives inside in winter, of course. And here's the herb area. Quite a few herbs there. And a rose just there. Not quite sure what that rose is. It's rather a bright red. My favourite bit was here. It was here already. Anyway, down we go, down the garden, under the hazel, which probably needs a trim. And you're beginning to look at now the first bank of yew trees, which went in the autumn 2013. It's soon going to be autumn 2016, so they'll be 3 years old. And you can see they're getting up. This one here is the very top, the highest one, is about my neck height, so it must be more than 5 foot tall. Some of them are much lower, and I noticed they grow better when they're backed by plants, which is interesting because there's plenty of euphorbia behind here, whereas this one, which is lower, this bit is just driveway. Behind there, incidentally, is an old bay tree. Anyway, this thing, it might have caught your eye, is a weather station. It transmits stuff back to a nice little viewing place in the kitchen, so you can see what's going on if you don't want to walk outside. But it has pressure and other things on it, so it's quite useful. Here under the tree are 2 lovely pelargoniums given to me by Gillian Pugh, or she grew them for me. They're called capitatum. They're really lovely ones. they don't look their best under here because of course they don't get quite enough sun. They don't get any sun really except in the early morning when it comes in low, but they're doing all right. But I think they're lovely, beautiful soft pink. Anyway, there is my pride and joy, my table that was given to me by the children or the family in Australia for my birthday. No, sorry, for Christmas, the last Christmas, 2015-16. And well, they contributed to it. I didn't say they'd give it to me completely because it was quite an expensive piece, but I think it looks lovely under here. I actually put it up by the pond to start with, and I had to wait months before the chaps could come back and move it for me because I got it wrong. Anyway, here it is now, and it's a lovely old bit of York stone on metal, I suppose, cast iron feet with York stone bases, and I think it'll never move again. Right, now down here, turning round, backing up a little bit, you've got this mass of euphorbia, which I do love, Wolfenii, and they act as a sort of bulwark all the way up and down these beds, both on the right and on the left in the distance over there. And in between there's a certain amount of planting, not a lot, verbenas, stachys, an absolutely gorgeous fennel, which I'll get to again because you can only really see it when it's backed by the hazel tree, because I like these really tall things that come up. There's lavenders, rosemaries, a particular kind of, what's that called? Oh, it'll come back to me, I think, but I can't remember quite what it is. It's rather a weird one. Anyway, we'll pass over that because I can't remember. Looking down to Angelica, which last year was absolutely enormous and beautiful. This year it's rather small and insignificant, which is interesting. There's Nepeta, of course, and more stachys and verbena, which I love, and more euphorbia. And then you're getting to the other end, the buttress of yew hedging at the far end of this lawn. Under the hazel tree, you've got quite nice ferns, which have been here a long time. There's some yucca, and there's becoming more of a mixed border here. Stachys in the front, a couple of roses, Winchester Cathedral and Margaret Merrill, which you can see just out there. Euphorbia at the back, Aquilegias, lots of lily of the valley, which was left over from my predecessors, which I like, and Crocosmia. And I didn't know that I had Crocosmia. I'm not sure it was here last year, but it's appeared, and I think it's lovely. In fact, this combination of stachys and Crocosmia I think is wonderful. This beautiful mauve from the lavender. Stachys has this sort of pinky hue to some of its flowers, and Crocosmia on top. It's a lovely combination, purely by chance. Now you're looking through between the bulwarks of yew, which will soon be sort of 4 or 5 feet high, is the grass garden, which dominates this end. And as Gillian Pugh, whose grass garden was the inspiration for it originally, said when she came the other day, it calls you down the garden. You can see it waving at you, and it calls you down. And it does indeed. The light, the colour of it, and the brightness of it calls you down to come and have a look. So that's wonderful. Just before I get there, I'll look over the wall at the borrowed landscape of my neighbours, and there's a lovely, very, very dark buddleia you can see just here, and I can smell it. Gorgeous, backed by the chestnut. And there's another great big buddleia just here, which comes from their garden. There's my wisteria on this wall. And then you go over. We'll come back to the grasses because that may take a little time, but of course there's plenty of rosemary on either side. There's more verbena. There's some euphorbias here which actually are very disappointing. I didn't buy the right ones. My old ones disappeared in the winter, and I bought Euphorbia martini, and in fact the ones that I had the year before were Martini Calibri, and they were much more interesting and much taller. So I'll have to make sure I get the right ones next time. Lots of fern. The rose that when I did this video 2 years ago I called Comte de Chambord is not actually, it's Isfahan. I was corrected by one of my friends who came around the garden. It's a lovely one. It was out very fully for the whole of May and June, and has only just lost its last blooms. It doesn't repeat flower, unfortunately. I've got a new friend who came into the garden the other day and happens to have been one of the gardeners at Mottisfont, which, as you know, is the most beautiful rose garden around here. Anyway, he was telling me how to prune it, which is jolly useful. Didn't really know about that before. There's quite a lot of this stuff, which is, what's it called? Funny name. Echinops, that's right. Echinops and stachys again, which I really love. I'd have a whole garden of stachys if I could. More echinops, different colour. And in the back you've got Gertrude Jekyll down the back, and this one is Munstead Wood, which of course is a Gertrude Jekyll garden. Unfortunately Munstead Wood's not out. Deep red and with a wonderful scent, but they're both very beautiful, I think. Lovely. Some roses on the wall which need training properly, and I'm going to train all of those roses across that wall for next year. Some stocks and euringiums. I love euringiums. These are going over now. This was piercing bright blue, sort of grey blue. It was absolutely gorgeous, but it's still rather a lovely colour, even though it's gone all rusty. And behind there's a great big hollyhock, enormous hollyhock, as they always are. Managed to keep it pretty clean, actually. They often get their leaves terribly eaten, but this one's nearly whole, which is very lucky indeed. There's the hebe, which I cut right back last year, and it hasn't flowered so much this year, but it will next year. But it needed a good chop. There's some more euringiums down here, but they weren't ready to come up. I guess they'll come up next year and flower. I don't think they'll flower this year. They're so far behind now, and it's mid-July. There's a box there that I stuck in this year. I water it a great deal. I hope it'll be alright. It looks fine, and I want it to create a nice sort of block at the end of the bed there before we get into this incredible bit of wild garden, which has now more or less collapsed. Now, this should have really been photographed or videoed 2 months ago, because it was all standing up. It was all in a mass of different flowers and colours. Now it's mostly just the whites, and please don't ask me what wildflowers are, because I really haven't learned. I should do, but they're great fun. I think it's fantastic, and you get these amazing different things coming up. And the back's more or less collapsed. In the back is Annabelle in a pot, and there's a rose there, Wedding Day, which I'm trying to train up into my neighbour's yew, but it hasn't really taken very well at the moment. I need to do some more work on that. This is all going to be cut down in September, and then it partially regrows, and then it survives the winter, at least that's the theory. So I'm going to have to do a lot of chopping, or get someone to do a lot of chopping in a month's time. In the bed here by the summer house, there's an enormous mass of evergreen honeysuckle Halliana, which actually this year was jolly good. It's taken a couple of years to establish properly, but it was throwing a beautiful scent around, and still is, although it's looking a little bit tired now. There's a massive buddleia at the back here. In here there are stocks and sedums, and and a bit of alchemilla and a bit of lavender and a few other things, a bit of rosemary. Not too much. Lavender's at the front. And then we go on past the summer house, and you can see I had to take everything in yesterday because the weather wasn't looking too good. Haven't put it back out again, but everything is set now in the sun, and I think I'll come back here and have some tea a little bit later on. Still, we're not talking about summer houses, we're talking about the plants really. Oh yes, there's sort of Christmas roses here, which look jolly good actually at the right time of year. Agapanthus, of course, growing well there. There's some ceanothus in the pot. I don't think they do awfully well, these ceanothus, but I'll try and get them better next year. It's of course too late for them now. And then the orchard. Now the orchard is planted with what, 7 or 8 new trees. There are cherries, there are green gages, there's plums, there's apples, all of various named varieties, and they're all planted except one, the pear over there by the shed, planted for friends who have gone. So here, for instance, is my old secretary Joe Johns' green gage, which I'm hoping is going to have some lovely green gages on, but I think the frost came at the wrong time, and I think most of these fruit trees are not going to bear fruit this year, as indeed the existing plums are not really going to either. There's very little on any of them, which is a shame. The apple at the back looks pretty healthy, so that's all right. But the Victoria here, the skimpy one, has only 1 or 2 plants on it, which is a great shame. Anyway, this big one here, I'm not quite sure what sort of plum it is. It's a damson, or almost like a damson when it does have plums. I put a new climber on here, a Chilean climber, which I hope will scramble up the whole tree. And as we come round, there are 2 types of Trachelospermum. That's the Asiatic one, very slow growing, but it's beginning to go now. And this one, which I only got a couple of months ago as a new planting, is a variegated Trachelospermum jasminoides. I think that'll look wonderful when that spreads. Here are the tomatoes, looking pretty good. Some pelargoniums in there which haven't been planted yet, again from Gillian Pugh. They're a lovely lemon scented pelargonium. And there's another climber in there, and I forget exactly what it's called. I only bought it recently, and I'm going to get it to go all over the summer, all over the shed as well. And then there's this very healthy looking pear. There's a nice black stemmed bamboo at the back here, filling in this gap. And of course there's climbing hydrangea pitularis, taking up some wall space, and hopefully that'll cover the whole of that wall in one great sweep in a couple of years' time. Right, let's come back and have a look at the grasses. Now, the grasses went in mostly in late 2013, early 2014. If you look at the old 2014 video, you can see them mostly tiny, but they came up very well that year, and they've been doing awfully well last year as well, so they're full size and they're no trouble at all. They're rather lovely, and they create this really quite interesting garden at the end. The box have remained healthy throughout, and as with other people, you now say that the best thing to do with box to avoid box blight or illness or disease is to water it a lot. And I water these quite a bit, so they'd never have any stress. And they look jolly healthy. They've been trimmed by a friend of mine in the village, Bruce Williams, who is an absolute expert gardener and expert trimmer. Be a nightmare to do these 18 box yourself, so he very kindly does it for me, which is wonderful. There's a lovely euphorbia here, which in spring has a beautiful sort of acid yellow flower, but it spreads wonderfully. And I put a couple more in here, which are very small at the moment, so you can't see them, but I think they're wonderful. Paroskia, of course, fabulous Paroskia, the Russian sage, in its rather piercing mauvey blue livery. And I think all those go as well. There's our usual friend Erigion, which spreads beautifully. If you let it, it would go all over the base of this gravel garden. Maybe I will. Anyway, there are various grasses. I won't go through the individual names, but there's, of course, Stipa gigantea, the biggest one. There's Overdam, Calamagrostis, Carl Forster, and before I get round the corner, I must just touch on, quite apart from the wonderful spread of Alchemilla that grows here, and also the new little one that I put in here. I'm not sure it's big enough to justify its position. It's Sanguiforbia tanna. I'll see how that does. If it gets bigger next year, I'll keep it. Otherwise, I think it's not quite strong enough for that space. Of course, the echinaceas are looking stunning at the moment. Really lovely. And coming around here, there's another accent, which I should have made much bigger. I need about 3 or 4 plants, which is Helianthemum Moorheim Beauty. Almost going over, but it sort of catches the eye as you're looking down from the house. Now look at the colour of those Paroscias, aren't they fantastic? When I say they, there's only one just there, because they're jolly big plants. And they set off, or they go awfully well, I think, with this pheasant grass, the low-growing pheasant grass, which goes a lovely sort of russety colour in autumn. So this looks stunning, with these great big towers of Calamagrostis, Carl Forster above, and 1 or 2 other types. This is interesting. Around the corner, there is an even taller grass, which is Calamagrostis Richard Hansen. Now it's only just coming out. You see there's a fluffy bit at the top here, which is just appearing, and that is going to go up still further, and it'll be taller than the Stipa gigantea. I know it was last year, which is astonishing, really. So it will probably be nearly 10 foot tall when it's finished. Stipa is usually 8 foot. I think that's nearly 10 foot. Again, wonderful plants, no trouble at all, bend beautifully with the wind. The sedums look awfully good in here too, I think. There's a dark sedum, which I should have commented on earlier around the corner. This is a nice light green sedum. One of my favourite plants has now completely gone over. There's an allium there, where there's a white sticker on the ground. That's an Allium ceruleum, which is a piercing bright blue. So nice. Here's the tanner again. Again, I think they're too small for this particular garden. We're going to have to put in something with more weight. Oh, I should have cut the geranium right back. I better get in and do just that. Needs cutting back. And then it should even come back and flower again before the autumn and winter. Now look at that. Isn't that astonishing? The Paroscia is just amazing. Russian sage. It's a lovely plant. I'm surprised we don't see more of it. I don't remember ever seeing it at Chelsea, but I'm sure it's been there. But I don't know who grows it particularly, but it looks superb and is so bright and cheerful. Anyway, so you come back this way again, and you're looking back up the garden now, past the grasses. You've got a nice little seat there if you want to sit there and look at grasses there. You can turn and see where one has lunch and then tea, and then have a drink in the late afternoon, because that bench in the corner is where the sun hits last, almost last. And then you can come all the way back up, past the yew hedge, past the lavender and rosemary. Oh, I didn't actually mention You, my dear chap, are doing really well. The Sinara, the artichoke, is fantastic. He's only just really come out properly, and there are 4 heads now. And what I really like, last year he didn't do so well, so I planted a new one. This is a new one. What I really like is in autumn, the head goes all brown and battered and looks really architectural, really beautiful. It's quite nice now, but it'll look even better later on, especially against the grasses. So there we are, we're looking at the grasses waving a little in late afternoon breeze and sunshine. The echinacea just behind, adding a bit of colour and interest. And you're looking over the top now of the yew hedge, which I will let come up to about 5 feet, so it'll be just around the top of the car, and so hide cars in the driveway as much as possible. Well, a reasonable amount. I don't want them completely closed in, because I think too high green hedges wouldn't be a good idea. You see, there's the driveway, and I think you would get too much dark green and you'd feel too closed in. So about 5 foot, I think. Now, I did say I'd come back to the fennel. Isn't the fennel fabulous? It's going right up. It must be 10 feet high now above the yew hedge, and you can only really see it against the backdrop of the dark hazel and the shadows there. But it's beautiful. I'm so glad I got that in. So I'm going to keep those, and probably put another one in to mirror it down in this part of this bed, the right hand side of the mirror bed, so there are 2 of them. Anyway, I'll see. That's something for next year. Now we look back up to the house through the quince, along the path, which is decorated now with the yellow of the alchemilla. I cut the alchemilla flowers off in the grass garden because they'd gone over and were getting brown, but these ones haven't, so they're still that lovely acid greeny yellow, and still look nice, but I'll cut them off later and maybe some more will come. So you're looking back up, shielded by the tree, to the house and the kitchen and the grass, and I must say I'm quite pleased with the grass. You can see the stripes in it because I mowed it this morning. This lawn, I noticed from the old video, was looking very rough, and of course it was only a year after the building was done, so that the grass had taken a real pounding and wasn't very nice anyway. But I've been looking after it, and I use a company called Lawn Tech to come 4 times a year and give it a top dressing and deal with any weeds that are in, and it works really well, and I think they've done a super job. So all the lawn is really looking very nice, even this old bit of lawn, quite apart from the new one, which is the all down below the hazel, and the orchard is all new turf. Except for one thing, this very rough bit here. I had a garden party in about 3 weeks ago. Was it 3 weeks ago? 2 weeks? 3 weeks ago? And 40 people stood under the hazel because it was blazing hot, and they were all keeping out of the sun. And you can see that bit of the grass has been trampled down, so I've been watering it, and it'll come back in time. But it shows the value of the hazel, because the hazel was wonderfully cool, whereas everything else was 27 degrees or so, and people were feeling the heat. Anyway, there's the garden. The sun's just gone, but you can still see the light brightness of the grasses calling you down past the dark green of the euphorbias and the yew, and the background of my hedge and the neighbours' trees below that. So there we are. We're looking back quite nice in July 2016. And back up to the house where I'm going to have a cup of tea. Okay, bye bye now.